So, Tears of the Kingdom is an absolute masterpiece of a game. It's absolutely amazing and improves on Breath of the Wild in so many ways. So, I'm not even super far into it, but I think this might be my new favorite game of all time, which is absolutely crazy, because it just came out. But since Breath of the Wild was my previous #1 game, and this game just seems to be a lot better, that's why. So yeah, there's just so many things in this game that I could talk about. I might eventually do a full review of this game, but considering the massive size and scope of this game, that'll take a while. And rushing yourself to complete a game for any reason, it'll lessen your enjoyment. So I've just been playing Tears of the Kingdom a lot recently, just taking my time, doing whatever I feel like, which is my opinion is the best way to play. And I'm also trying to go through the whole game without using guides, because just the satisfaction is greater after you figure something out. But yeah, anyways, so since the game just came out about a week ago, I'm not going to be talking about any major story spoilers. I'm very far from completing this game, I'm sure, but I'll talk about some things early on in the game, from around like the first 20 to 30 hours or so. I'll avoid major spoilers, especially the story, but I will talk about it a little bit. Yeah, I won't talk about the story too much. I'll talk about like the mechanics, the world, just anything I find interesting in playing the game so far, and there's a lot of that. If you want to avoid any slight spoilers for this game, then I'd recommend you click off and then play it first, but I will keep the spoilers to a minimum. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so first of all, there's quite a few really nice quality of life features in Tears of the Kingdom. So, there's a different and new menu in this game. The menu scrolls up and down for each section. You can use the left and right shoulder buttons to change sections, and this makes scrolling the inventory and menu a bit easier. And a new nice feature in the menus is sorting by fuse attack power. This shows the more powerful and better items to fuse. Also, another very useful thing, sorting by most used, especially when scrolling through materials to fuse with an arrow. I can see the items I use the most to fuse with arrows like bomb flowers, eyeballs, and more. The log feature. So the new log feature is a small but useful thing you can use when having conversations in this game. So if you press Y while in a conversation, all the text in that conversation so far will show up in one place, so you can read it all at once. And this is especially useful if you speed past some dialogue accidentally and you want to go back and read it. Scroll wheel. So, the abilities are now selected using a wheel, like the item wheel in Animal Crossing New Horizons. You press and hold L to open it, and you point your stick in the direction and let it go to select it. This is quicker and a bit easier than scrolling left and right to select each ability like in Breath of the Wild, and it did take me a bit to get used to, but once I got used to it, I could just quickly switch abilities, and it was pretty nice. The food recipe system. So, Nintendo has made cooking a bit better in this game. So when making food, any meals you make, they will be logged as recipes, and you can select an item to view recipes for that, and then you can select something to instantly grab all the materials if you have them, and then make that meal. So it would have been nice to be able to view all the recipes we have in one place, like literally like a cookbook, and like bulk cook meals at once, but it's still an improvement, so I'll take it. Better inventory management. So when you go to a chest and open it, if your inventory is full, it pops up and you can easily select an item to drop. So unlike Breath of the Wild, it took way longer to back out of a chest, drop something before opening it back up again. And this is a small change, but it's very helpful and it saves some time. So next up, the story in this game is very interesting. It's much more prevalent and in your face than Breath of the Wild, which is very nice. So, the game, it starts off right away, thrusts you directly into the story instead of starting in a menu or something, gradually letting you get into the game like some other games or past Zelda games. The opening cinematic part is dark and creepy. Zelda and Link are exploring underneath Hyrule Castle. It's also very immersive because you actually control Link during part of the game underneath Hyrule Castle. And it's quite interesting how it explains how you start off in the game so weak, since it takes place after Breath of the Wild where he has all his hearts. So yeah, Link has like 30 hearts or whatever, he's at full power, but then he's attacked by Ganon, and the Gloom loses nearly all of them, and that explains why he starts with only 3 hearts and no stamina upgrades. And Zelda also falls, which sets up the story of trying to find and rescue Zelda, and it's just a really intense and tragic scene where Link tries to grab Zelda but ultimately fails, and then wakes up later in the Sky Islands after nearly being defeated. And there seems to be more voice acting in this game. Not everything is voice acted, of course, but the more important scenes are, and the voice acting is very good. The in-between scenes or other slightly less important scenes is just text, but honestly it would take a lot more time if you had to sit through cutscenes for every single scene, so you can just read these quicker. So, the Zonai tribe is very interesting. So there's the interesting Zonai devices you can use to the Zonai enemies like constructs and some various Zonai characters from the past. So many things in this game are focused around the color green to show the Zonai connection, like in Breath of the Wild, where they use blue to show the connection to ancients, like the Guardians and the ancient arrows, and things like green spirals and shrines, constructs, Zonai devices, and more are all green. So, Zonai devices, they work with Ultra Hand. You can make vehicles and contraptions, and you can also get portable Zonai devices to put in your inventory and be able to use them anywhere you need to. And there's Zonai dispensers where you can put in certain Zonai materials to receive a bunch of portable Zonai devices. These Zonai devices, they have limited power, but this can eventually be expanded using energy cells, using Zonai, and crystals to make the max power for these increase. Plus, you can use Zonai charges to temporarily refill the power of Zonai devices if you are currently using them. So, some of the Zonai devices I've found so far are the flame emitters, the fans, the wheels, the steering thing, I don't know what it's called, the rockets, time bombs, and there's probably more. The flame emitter is really useful for attaching to shields with fuse and then shielding while fighting, and then lighting the enemies on fire like a flamethrower. The fans, also very useful, can make vehicles go faster or fly. And the Zonai wheels can be attached to make vehicles go faster. The rockets can be thrown or ridden up into the sky, or attached to give things a really big speed boost. I just love all the Zonai devices. In combination with Ultra Hand, it gives so many creative options. So next up, I wanted to mention the performance and graphics of this game. So I think the graphics look a little bit better than Breath of the Wild, and the art style again is very nice. Things like the autumn-like yellow colors, the sky islands are very pretty. The draw distance is much improved. It's impressive just how far you can see around you, especially from the sky islands, and it's more clear and less foggy looking than in Breath of the Wild. And the sky islands are just really pretty, the clouds look great. The water also looks really good. I've said this before, but Nintendo just makes such great looking water in their games for some reason, it's crazy. And the attention to detail when you splash in water and then Link jumps out of the water and then Link is actually dripping wet for a bit after getting out of the water, which is great. That's awesome. So next thing, a really big thing in this game, shrines and temples or dungeons. So shrines, they return in this game in a little bit of new and a different form, along with dungeons return, but in a more prevalent form than Breath of the Wild. Technically, the Divine Beasts count as dungeons, but those are controversial for fans to say the least. A lot of people didn't like them, and people wanted more classic dungeons, and the temples are much similar to classic dungeons. So yeah, anyways, first of all, so shrines, in this game, there's a lot better, more interesting, and there's a lot more options for variety in the puzzles, especially using the new abilities. So you can use like Ultra Hand to build things to figure out different puzzles, and there's just many ways to solve shrines now since the new abilities leave things really open-ended with the things you can do, and the shrines are just designed in the way where even if you don't figure out the quote-unquote intended solution, there's at least several other ways to solve it. So in past Zelda games, and to some extent in Breath of the Wild, there would only be one solution to a puzzle. And those could still be fun, but this allows players to be much more creative and causes less frustration when you can't figure out that one solution. And also, you receive lights of blessings from shrines when you complete them. This is very similar to the orbs you get in Breath of the Wild from shrines, and if you have 4 of these, you can exchange them on a goddess statue for a heart container or stamina vessel, just like Breath of the Wild, of course. So yeah, temples, they act as dungeons in this game. They're much closer to dungeons from past Zelda games, and overall just much better than the Divine Beasts. They're bigger than the shrines, of course, and they're large. You need to explore and use your different abilities to solve puzzles and get through them. I'll just mention, minor spoilers here for one of the temples in the game, the Wind Temple, but again, nothing too major, so yeah. So far I found and completed the Wind Temple, and it was very good. So I'm pretty sure all the temples have like a certain theme like this one did, and that's just very cool, especially compared to the Divine Beasts. They were just too similar, they kind of looked the same. So this temple was very, very big, there were a lot of different enemies, and there was a separate dungeon map with 3 layers to toggle between. I was confused at some parts, but I kept exploring, and I found a way to get to some different areas, and I had to find and activate all 5 locks in order to open the gate where all the wind and the blizzard was coming from. There was a lock inside a room that I could not at all figure out how to get to, but eventually I figured out how to go on the level beneath it and then get in the right position and ascend right into the room since the door was locked. Finally, once I activated all the locks, there was an awesome great boss fight. Massive flying monster, and I had to fly and glide through the air and try to hit its weak spot, which was made out of ice, and it was a little tough, but it was very fun. So yeah, overall, I enjoyed this one quite a lot, and I'm very interested to try out the other temples, and this was a lot less frustrating as well, and more fun than the Divine Beasts, which, those are still good, but there were some times I just had to use guides, because I could not figure out where to go, or where to rotate the parts of the beast, or whatever. Next up, Korok Seeds. So yeah, Koroks and Korok Seeds, they return in this game. A lot of people don't like them, but yeah, they return. It seems like there's less Koroks in this game, but I could be wrong. Maybe there's still a lot. I just haven't found a ton so far. And there's quite a bit of new backpack Koroks. These are like more in-depth quests, and you actually get 2 Korok seeds for completing these. So you need to use Ultra Hand to grab them and take them to their Korok friends. Some which are easier, but some you might need to make a vehicle or have to be creative to get them to their friend, which could be kind of far away. And Korok seeds are still used to expand your inventory. And there's a funny new dance that Hestu does when given Korok seeds, so that's interesting, I guess. Alright, so the big new abilities in this game: Ultra Hand, Fuse, Recall, and Ascend. So these abilities that are introduced to Link through the shrines in the opening Sky Islands, these help the player get used to them and also gives them some ideas of what they can be used for. So first up, Ultra Hand. You can attach any material together to make stuff such as buildings and vehicles. It's easy to put together a flying or driving vehicle. You can just hit any part of the vehicle and activate all the Zonai devices on it easily. Fuse. So fusing gives so many options for weapons and arrows. You can use nearly any items and fuse them for some really cool and powerful weapons. Ores also give weapons elemental power, such as Opal with water, Topaz with shock, and Ruby with fire, along with many others for players to discover. This also makes weapon durability a bit better in this game, because you can easily make new weapons with the materials you have, and it gives the player plenty of options to attack enemies. And this makes gathering materials much more useful and worth it, because every item does something, so they can be used to make weapons, so now there's always a point in grabbing items and fighting enemies to get something good. Unfortunately, you can't fuse items multiple times, which I was a little bit disappointed by, but honestly there's already enough fusing options, so it's not a big deal, and it makes it less complicated and chaotic than if you could just fuse 20 things together, which would be cool, but a little bit too crazy. And you can only pick up regular arrows now in this game, and you can find plenty of them around the world. Instead of the various existing arrows like in Breath of the Wild you needed to find or buy, you can just make them yourselves. Instead of being able to stack up with tons of bomb arrows, you have to use bomb flowers, and they're more limited supply, so you can't just use them all the time, but you can fuse arrows with other things if you need to, and there's a lot of options. Next ability, Recall. So, Recall, it's quite useful in reversing time of different things, such as contraptions like the spinning platforms in the Temple of Time, so you can reverse their direction and go up them. It can be also used to reverse the courses of projectiles and hit them back at enemies. And it can be used for objects like rafts to make them go backwards and travel on them, or moving something with Ultra Hand, then recalling it so you can get on it and make it go forward, like with the Zonai birds to make them fly. And then the last major new ability, Ascend. So, fun fact, Ascend was actually originally used by the developers as a cheat code to quickly get out of caves so they didn't have to backtrack, and they thought it was really good, and they put it in the game because it's very useful. So not only does this allow for you to explore and move around easier, it also makes for some interesting puzzles and allows you to sort of break the game by going up places you normally wouldn't be able to get to without it. You can literally just ascend to the top of Temple of Time for no reason. You can just go through the roofs and yeah, it's cool. And not just mention, not a new ability, but the camera returns from Breath of the Wild, and I got it from Robbie, and used it to capture a photo of something from the depths, and now I can capture pictures and save them to the Hyrule Compendium, just like Breath of the Wild. It's kind of weird you don't start with the camera and you get it later, but yeah, that's interesting. And there's probably some new abilities, because I have a few things in the scroll wheel I haven't unlocked yet, but I'm not sure what those are yet, so I'll leave it at that. Yeah. Overall, these new abilities are just really great, especially Fuse and Ultra Hand. They add so much creative freedom to the game. For the most part, these new abilities are better versions of the abilities from Breath of the Wild. Ultra Hand is like Magnesis, but you can use it for literally anything, not just metal. And then Recall is kind of like a better version of Stasis. And I do miss the champion abilities from Breath of the Wild. Rivali's Gale was great, it was very useful, but Ascend does help a bit, as long as you can find somewhere underneath to ascend through and get to the top of the mountain. And I have gotten the Wind Gust ability from Rito Village, so the other 3 villages will probably give me abilities similar to the champion abilities from Breath of the Wild. So, next big thing, all the new areas to explore. So, Sky Islands, caves, and the depths. So, first up, Sky Islands. There's many Sky Islands in the skies above Hyrule, including the ones where you start the game on, which they have a lot of content and exploration, and they act as a tutorial area to get the player used to the controls and the new abilities, just like the Great Plateau. There's many different ways to get up to Sky Islands, such as using recall on falling rocks, gliding from other Sky Islands, platforming across platforms and ascending, flying with Zonai devices, and more. So for the regional phenomena quest in Rito Village, I had to traverse a bunch of platforms using ascend and gliding that led up to Sky Islands in a dungeon, so that was interesting. And it's really easy to get down from the Sky Islands as well, using dive. If you press and hold R while falling, you'll fall extra fast, and you can use this to get to the surface quickly. Jumping off the Sky Islands and diving towards the surface at the beginning, that was very cool, and the title drop and the main theme music, then splashing into the water with water going everywhere because of the high drop, that was a great way to start the game. Yeah, I really like the new Sky Islands. They are really cool looking, and there's a lot of interesting things to explore on them. Most of them aren't very big, but it does add a good amount of new things to explore. And then next up, caves. So, caves can be found in various mountains, and some of them are quite big, with lots of things to find like ore to mine, enemies, water, and more. It's also possible to go down wells to directly fall into some underground areas, and this can be quite useful for ascending into areas from underneath. Like, there was a quest in Hateno Village where you have to get inside a building but it's locked. So, you can go in a cave and go underground and ascend up into it. So I was not expecting there to be so many caves, but it's quite cool how there's caves around like most of Hyrule, and they have a lot of interesting stuff in them, and they're fun to explore. And finally, the depths. So, the depths are an underground dark area that runs entirely underneath Hyrule. There's lots of gloom down there, along with some gloom on the surface around chasms, and this gloom is similar to Malice, but it's a lot more deadly and more alive in a way. So when you get damaged by gloom or enemies down there, it takes your hearts away permanently or, well, temporarily, and they cannot be restored through food, which much raises the stakes and intensity of exploring the depths. And the enemies in the depths are also much tougher and more powerful than on the surface, and this truly makes exploring down there a very challenging experience. Also, the Gloom Hands, I think they're called, they're these super creepy enemies. They're like blobs of gloom. They can appear and swarm you, kill you quickly if you're not careful. And somehow once, I was on the surface, and these Gloom Hands, they appeared out of nowhere, totally jump scared me, and nearly got killed because it swarmed me. That was weird. And also down there's light roots, which these are big glowing plants, and they can be activated like towers, and they mark part of the map, and they also light up the surrounding area since it's very, very dark down there. And fun fact, these directly correlate with shrines on the surface, so if you know where a shrine is on the surface, you can mark it in the same spot in the depths, and you'll find a light root. And same goes for finding a light root down there and correlating it to a shrine in the surface. And when activating light roots, it restores any hearts lost to the gloom, which is very helpful since it could be easy to die down there with little hearts due to the gloom damage adding up, and it gives some incentive to activate these light roots. Yeah, I did not expect the depths to be so big. Nintendo didn't really promote anything about it, so it's a complete secret until launch. And I still need to explore them more, but it's very cool, dark, and creepy. So, the world uses the same main map, but it's changed in many ways. So, there's the new areas and villages, of course, like in front of Hyrule Castle, there's a whole new village, Lookout Landing, very charming little community, lots of different interesting NPCs and buildings, and this serves as the area you go to towards the beginning of the adventure to advance the story and meet Purah and Robbie to get the paraglider. Lookout Landing also has a nice underground emergency shelter, which you can go down into to see lots of people doing their own thing, and that you can interact with. I also really like this village, and the music's very good and relaxing as well. And there's quite a few change areas and villages, so yeah, many areas from Breath of the Wild return, but they're different in quite a few ways. So just a few examples I have found so far. Lyrelin Village has been taken over by pirates. The NPCs from there have fled and they're living in other areas now, and they tell the stories of fleeing and how the village was taken over and destroyed by pirates. Hateno Village is now a hub for fashion. There's mushroom buildings and people wearing mushroom hats, and Hateno Village also has a new schoolhouse now. Rito Village, overtaken by a massive blizzard, freezing temperatures, and there's snow everywhere, which makes it difficult for the NPCs to go anywhere or gather food. Hyrule Castle now is basically floating in the sky with the gloom, and visiting it has a very different tone from Breath of the Wild. You can just walk in, and instead of being targeted by a bunch of guardians, it's just kind of empty and peaceful, and there's just some NPCs walking around. Kakariko Village is much more tourists, and everywhere just has Zonai ruins falling from the sky, which the NPCs talk about a lot. And Death Mountain just stopped erupting, the lava cooled, and new roads formed. I just love how they use the same world but change it in so many great ways. It feels familiar still, but I love going back to the villages I love in Breath of the Wild and seeing how much they change. Tears of the Kingdom also has lots of interesting NPCs to talk to and a much more full world with more interesting side quests. So there just seems to be more NPCs around and it feels less empty. It's fun talking to every NPC and seeing what they have to say. And the side quests and side adventures are more meaningful and interesting, like one I've experienced so far, the one in Hateno Village where there's a mayor election between Cece and the old mayor. So, Cece's the owner of the new clothing shop, Reed is the current mayor, and he does not like the new designs and the mushroom-themed buildings and fashion. And there's a whole bunch of connected quests for different people that connect, and all part of a side storyline separate from main quests, and it's not just like a one-off fetch quest, it's like a whole connected side story. I just really like these side quests and adventures. I feel like there's a lot more motivation to do these than some in Breath of the Wild, and they all seem to add to the story, even if not part of the main quest. I've talked to like every NPC I come across, and they always have something interesting or useful to say. And I've gotten a few shrine quests as well. One shrine quest was very interesting. I found the shrine first, but the portal was not activated, so it told me I needed to get and bring a green crystal to activate it. I followed the path where it was, and it took quite a bit to get it back since I couldn't just ascend while holding it, and I had to make a flying machine and then attach the crystal, fly it out of the cave, and then up, and then try to use a bird flying machine thing to get it to the shrine since it was so far away. And unfortunately that didn't work. I fell to the ground and I gave up for now, but it was very interesting. And characters also seem to react to the environment more. The characters, they talk about events happening in the game, like Link returning, the upheaval, the weather, and more. Like once I went to a stable during a rainstorm, they were all aware of the weather, talking about how bad the storm was. And it's also funny how you can see NPCs running to get into their homes when it starts to rain. And also, I'll just mention, I love the NPC Addison. He's always standing around trying to get signs portraying Hudson from the construction company to stand up, and every time, there's a different way to use Ultra Hand to gather some nearby materials to make sure the sign stands up, and he can make sure it stays standing. It's just very funny how Link just tells him to let go of the sign. He's confused, but he does it, then he's surprised and happy when it stays standing, or mad when it falls down. And I thought this might get repetitive, but honestly it's been quite fun. The signs, they can be different sizes or shapes, and it sometimes has been on hills or different areas, so you can't just use the same thing every time to make it stand. You really have to get creative to make it stand up. This game also has great music and very atmospheric sound. So the music in this game, of course, is very, very good. Some songs return from Breath of the Wild, and there's also a lot of new songs. Some songs from Breath of the Wild, they are remixed in new forms and variations. Like the villages, they have the same themes playing, which these are great songs, so I'm glad they return. I love them. And then new locations, they have new music like Sky Islands, caves, the depths, and other various places. And then also some places have remixed music. Like the Rito Village theme is like slowed down, it's more chill to fit the vibes of all the snow around because it's a snowstorm. And there's a Lucky Clover Gazette newspaper company. They moved into what used to be a stable in Rito Village, and this is a cool remix version of the stable theme playing since it used to be a stable. And Breath of the Wild soundtrack just has been one of my favorite gaming soundtracks in general, and this one is going to be one of my favorites as well now. And then just the atmospheric sound. So when you're exploring in caves sometimes, like underneath a village, the music is more quieter and muffled sounding, so you really feel like you're still close, but obviously since you're underground, it makes sense. And the sound design is just great. Especially when you're playing with headphones, you can hear like the nature sounds, the wind, Link's footsteps, water, and more. It sounds great. It's just very cool. Then I want to talk about some of the new enemies and characters in this game. There's quite a lot. Enemy variety is much better than Breath of the Wild. There's many new enemies, and most of the enemies have different variations, like with varying power, like the different colored bokoblins. So yeah, I'm just going to go over a few new enemies I find cool in this game. There's literally walking trees now, which they just come alive out of nowhere and they start attacking you, and they need to be defeated with fire, which is crazy. There's also all the new different construct enemies. These are very interesting. There's several variations of them. Some are bigger and more powerful, and then some confuse items and attack with very powerful attacks. There's also the Flux Construct, which we saw in the trailers. It's a really big Zonai mini-boss made up out of blocks fused together. It can transform and change shape, and using the abilities like Recall and Ultra Hand to defeat it was very fun. So there's a core in between all the blocks that needs to be hit to damage it, and I used Ultra Hand to move some of the blocks out of the way, and I also used Fuse to attach eyeballs to the arrows to make homing arrows to easier hit the core. It was tough at first, but once I figured out what to do, it wasn't too difficult, and it was a pretty fun fight. There's also the flying wing enemies. I don't know what they're called, but there's a lot of them, and they fly around. They can drop items or things on you. One time I actually got blown up by one because I didn't see it coming, and it literally dropped a bomb barrel on me all of a sudden, and I exploded and died instantly. It's kind of a shame. They're so easy to defeat, but considering there's already plenty of difficult enemies in this game, that's fine. Also, the new variation of Talus is very cool, the Battle Talus. These are of course tougher than the normal stone taluses, and they have a whole enemy camp on top that are shooting arrows at you while the talus throws rocks. This is kind of tricky for me to get to the top and defeat the bokoblins and the talus, but I figured I could use Ascend to ascend through the talus, then get to the top and attack the bokoblins and hit the weak point to finally defeat it. And also there's a weird bug caterpillar type enemies. I don't really know what they're called. But these hang on walls and caves, and they're pretty creepy. They can eat Link, and they're defeated best with fire, and you need to hit their tongue thing, whatever that is, to defeat them. And there's new characters like Tulin, who's a bird from the Rito Village that helps you investigate the blizzard there, and who can summon winds to make you glide faster and further, which is very helpful. Yeah, after the Rito Village quest, I was able to summon his avatar nearly anywhere to use his wind powers, and he acts like a buddy and helps attack enemies for me, which is very helpful. And I just love like the different friendly types of constructs as well, and like the beginning Side Islands. They just do tasks around the islands, and they help you out, and they answer questions. And there's also quite a bit of new characters. I'm not going to get into all of them. Like, there's a new fan favorite character, Purah. Well, not really new, but she's different in this game. People online really like her. They've been trending a lot recently, and she seems cool and interesting. Of course, she helped develop the Purah Pad and is part of the survey team and serves quite an important part in the story. Not a new character, but she grew up kind of in a way. There's some weird aging thing. She's over 100 years old, but in Breath of the Wild, she used some de-aging thing and went too far back. She looked like a small child. Now she somehow fixed it. She looks like a young adult or something. I don't know. It's kind of weird. It doesn't make much sense, but whatever. And then finally, just some other various interesting or new things I found that are smaller but still very cool. So, the Purah Pad. The new Purah Pad is similar to the Sheikah Slate in Breath of the Wild, but it has some new and different features. It's shaped very similar to the Nintendo Switch, which is funny, but of course makes sense. The one in Breath of the Wild is more shaped like the Wii U gamepad, since of course it was developed for the Wii U originally. And the Purah Pad has a few different things like the Adventure Log. This is quite similar to the Adventure Log in Breath of the Wild, but instead of being accessed in the pause menu, now you access it via the Purah Pad. And the main quests are there at the top, then side adventures, which are side quests but more connected and in depth, and the shrine quests, which return from Breath of the Wild, and the side quests, and then finally the memories, where you can rewatch the memories you have collected so far. It also has a character profiles tab. On the Purah Pad, you can view different character profiles of important main characters, which shows their picture and gives a bunch of information about them. The map. The map now has 3 different layers you can toggle between: the sky, the surface, and the depth. These all have their own separate maps, which show all the points of interest and things you explore that will show up on there. The surface in the sky map is filled out through the Skyview Towers, and the depths map is of course filled out using the light root seeds. And then the album just shows the pictures taken with the camera ability, and you can also bulk delete photos and view them in full screen. Not sure if that feature was in Breath of the Wild, but it's still nice to have. And then the Hyrule Compendium, so that returns from Breath of the Wild, and you can take pictures of objects, enemies, treasure, and more to save the picture of them in there, and it shows some info about it, different locations where you can find it. I'm not really sure there's much point to this, to be honest, because there's no way to track if that item is nearby like you could with the Sheikah Slate in Breath of the Wild, which was very useful, but it's still kind of cool to have, I guess. So, stables and inns. Stables, they now have a membership system. Of course, you can board your horse at any stable, just like Breath of the Wild, and by staying at stables long enough, you earn points and you can unlock various rewards. You get points for lodging, registering a horse, and other options. Honestly, this was not at all necessary for Nintendo to add, but it's just a nice small addition. It just adds to the world, makes it feel more alive. And another really cool thing is, if you have save data from Breath of the Wild, and you had horses in that game, it detects that save data. You can access all of your same horses from Breath of the Wild, which, again, just very cool. And there's some new sleepover tickets, which you can get sometimes. Some NPCs will give them to you, and these let you stay at inns or stables for free for a night. And you can still whistle to call your horse if it was nearby. But I do wish we had the special horse armor from Breath of the Wild's DLC. That was just so useful, being able to call your horse from literally anywhere in the world and have it teleported to you. And I do miss some of the other DLC features, like seeing the path you've traveled on the map. But hopefully we'll see some of these features return in new DLC in the future, something like that. The new towers. So, the new Skyview Towers in this game, they act as fast travel points that Link gets shot up in the sky to scan the nearby surface in the sky area to add to the map. Some towers, they aren't as easy as just reaching them and activating them. Quite a few, they have a certain thing you need to do, like fight through enemies to reach it, rescue someone underneath the tower to activate it, find a way underground to ascend into it, and more. Activating these towers, it just feels more rewarding. They're more useful as well, because in the sky you can see all around you quite far, and you can mark spots on your map while flying if you see anything interesting. Amiibo support. So, using the various Zelda amiibos, you can get a bunch of special parasail cloths from chests, sometimes used to customize your paraglider. I think there's some ways of getting some of these without amiibo, but scanning them gets you different cool designs, which you can use at Hateno Village to change the look of the paraglider, which is very cool and fun. And I just love, when you die the paraglider, it shoots you through the roof of the building with your glider out so you can see the new design. Kind of random, but funny and cool. And I'm pretty sure all the Zelda amiibos are compatible, so scanning them, it gives you chests and boxes and materials and objects, just like Breath of the Wild, and the things you get sometimes change, so you can scan them once per day, and it's very helpful getting a lot of ore, arrows, meat, and other materials. And I've gotten some special armor and clothing from amiibo, similar to Breath of the Wild, with some clothing that have designs from past games, as references, which again, another just really cool, kind of random thing. It's awesome, yeah. Next up, the Upheaval. So the Upheaval is just the general event that happened in between games. This has to do with a lot of the story, so I won't go too far into it, but this is the cause of a bunch of things like the chasms opening and all the weapons decaying. All the NPCs are very aware of this and they talk about it quite a lot. There's some specific villages that have been affected, which are marked on the map in 4 spots, similar to the 4 divine beasts in Breath of the Wild, and you can of course do these in any order. Great Fairy Fountains. So yes, Great Fairy Fountains return from Breath of the Wild, and they can enhance your clothing and armor. They're hidden away in their plants, and they need to be convinced to come out in order to get them and let them enhance your clothing. So one of the fairy fountains I've found so far, so I needed to fix a broken cart, and then I had to bring some musicians along with my horse to lure out the fairy, which was pretty cool and interesting. There's also like some mini quests with like items you can find, so I found like an old map and marked an X on my map in the depths for a special item I could find. Another thing, I talked to an NPC. They marked 3 X's on my map for special clothing to find in caves. So these are like mini quests, they don't show up on the quest log, but I can look at my map and choose to go find them, and I found the 3 X's from that NPC, and they marked caves, and I explored them and I found some chests with some very useful armor, like the one for faster climbing and one for resistance to shock. And also just wanted to mention like some cool new items I found that I find pretty cool. There's a lot of new items, I obviously won't get into all of them, but there's a few of them like Sunderline. These can be used to restore gloom when cooked with food. Dazzle Fruit, these unleash dazzling sparkles to blind nearby monsters. Shock Fruit, these can be thrown to cause a big shock and make shock arrows. Hylian Pine Cone, these make massive flames when tossed into fire. And this isn't an item, but I wanted to mention it anyway, the Froggy Armor. So this allows Link to climb on walls even when it's raining. This honestly seems super useful to have, so you don't have to wait until the rain stops to climb. I have not gotten this yet, but I definitely will try to get this because this seems just so useful. And yeah, there's just a whole bunch of new awesome items and clothing in this game. A lot which I probably have not found, but that will be fun to find them. Next up, the rails. So the new rails, these are very cool. They're very fun to shield surf down or to ride carts up. It honestly makes it feel like I'm playing Sonic Frontiers or something. And there's a really cool shrine with some rails. I had to build a vehicle to go up the rails with fans, and I had to experiment quite a bit and make sure I didn't fall off the rails so I could reach the end. And then last thing I found interesting, so the Blood Moon returns. It has a new animation. It's pretty cool, a bit more intense. And some people might be disappointed because they don't like the Blood Moon. And I understand it can be annoying, especially if it goes off like an area you just defeated a bunch of enemies and they suddenly respawn. So yeah, that can be a bit annoying, but like of course it's still necessary. The enemies, they need to respawn eventually, and it serves as a way for the game to reset, since like honestly keeping track of like everything happening in the world for a long time, I'm sure it takes a lot of memory, and this game already pushes the Switch to its absolute limit, so it still makes sense. So yeah, anyways, this game just has a ton of awesome content. I'm gonna keep playing this amazing game, and I'm sure there's so much more things to do and to explore. I've been trying to do the main quest, but like I'll just get distracted because I see a tower or a cave or a chasm or just something else that's cool, and it feels like I could just explore forever because there's just so much. This video probably ended up quite long because there's so many great and interesting things about this game, but that's just why it's so amazing. Yeah, make sure to like and subscribe for some more Tears of the Kingdom content in the future. I talk way too long, so that's why my voice is kind of hoarse, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I have some more different Tears of the Kingdom videos and other videos coming in the future, so yeah, hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next video.